Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the program today, we have Shane Coyle. He's, I gotta say this, Libertarian for Trump. And John Cameron, the author of Rewire and Rekill, and the owner of CustomSalesTraining.com. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight and a lot to talk about next week, so let's get started. We're on the web, by the way, at accesssacramento.org, streaming live at, let's see here, 8 p.m. Thursday, noon on Friday, 4 a.m. on Saturday, on YouTube after the show has been shot. And let's see, on Channel 17, Sacramento, and cable channels all over the place. Check your local listing for time and channel. Ideal Conceal is the brand name of a new handgun. It's called that because it looks just like a cell phone. That's not one.
No.
I promise.
And
of course, the fact that it exists means that Senator Chucky Schumer wants to ban it. John, is there any way that's going to happen?
Well, gosh, I hope not. I mean, the whole idea of and it really looks similar to this, the prototype, whether it will end up that way. I mean, you can buy Derringers, you can buy all sorts of, you can buy an automatic that's about that big, you can buy a revolver that's about that big. So Schumer's concern is that he hasn't got enough airtime lately. And coming out, instantly against this and wanting to ban it, and based on Chuck Schumer's ability to reason, I think he probably thinks that the person's going to use it to shoot down aircraft. He's not. Schumer is not the word swift on these things. So I think it's a political ploy. So the ideal Conceal handgun is basically a Derringer in a non-threatening form. And I think it's 2-shot. The first prototype I looked up was 2-shot. And it's designed to do what? It's designed for someone to be able to defend themselves. Obviously, it's not an assassination weapon because it's metal. It's not like the plastic guns. So it's not designed to get through metal security screening. It's simply designed for someone to have a personal defense weapon that is small and innocuous and doesn't scare people, because when people see guns, they get scared. But if push comes to shove, which it does, they'll be able to take the weapon out and use it. That's the idea. And it's a prototype. So whether the guy can actually create the weapon, so what it's got to do is work. What it's got to do is be able to be taken from something that looks like this to something that goes like that quickly. So we'll see. And I can't fathom any reason for anybody being against someone being able to have one of these things, other than they want the state to have the sole job of protecting the citizenry so that they can keep cops employed, even though they don't protect people. And that's
there is one legitimate point that's been made against a concealed weapon that looks like a cell phone, and that is that the cell phone has become an ubiquitous method for recording police malfeasance. Mm-hmm. People very frequently whip out their cell phone and start recording when police make an unwarranted stop, when they're stopping people in a traffic stop for no good reason, when they are trying to do a civil asset forfeiture, again, for no good reason, when they are beating people up, homeless people and whatnot, for no good reason. And a lot of that is going on, as has been documented by cell phone recordings. So you've got a gun that looks like a cell phone, and somebody's holding up their cell phone, and now the cops will have a ready-made excuse to shoot anybody holding a cell phone.
Okay, but they don't need an excuse.
Well, yeah.
Because they're already shooting people who are holding up empty hands and saying they were reaching for a gun.
Right, but now,
they'll be able to give a reason. But this is what they're going to have to do. This is the device, as I've seen it, doesn't work like this. This is what it looks like to start. You don't go bang, bang, bang. You go
You got to pull it, you got to.
Bang.
Yeah, you got to
So,
do some stuff with that.
and, while you're doing that, hopefully the cop who's sitting there with his, gun pointed at your head anyway is going to shoot you. Or hopefully not. If he is violating your civil liberties, hopefully that's not the case. So I get, you're right. It can be another excuse for more police target practice. But it appears, based upon news stories over the last year or so, that or last 100 years, they're just out there more quickly now.
Because they're being recorded by cell phones.
Yeah, they're being recorded by cell phones. Cops don't really need an excuse to shoot people.
Well,
They just shoot people.
It's an interesting development, and I would say that, first of all, I'm in favor of concealed carry anytime, any place, not just where it's allowed right now. This would make it possible for people to do concealed carry where it is allowed. Obviously, you would not want legally to do concealed carry where it's prohibited. This would make it possible.
Where places where our
Where the politicians
rights
say you
have,
can't.
where our rights have been violated.
Where the Second Amendment doesn't apply, yes.
Yeah, where people have abridged the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Those places.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what it does is it makes it possible to do a concealed carry without causing undue attention, without alarming people who are just scared of guns just cause. So, from a practical standpoint, it's something that I can see as being a very practical weapon for defensive purposes only. Obviously, a two-shot with, I'm sure, small caliber and probably not a whole lot of stopping power.
It's enough to kill you. I think it's a 38 or a 380.
But it's not an AK-47 or a M16.
No,
or
it's
something.
not a jacketed high-speed round. So any police body armor out there, it doesn't take ballistic armor to stop it. So and based upon people's ability to take headshots with weapons, you'd have to be an awfully good shot with the thing to take a cop out. Because every cop I've seen in the last 10 years is wearing a flak vest that'll stop a small caliber round underneath their uniform top. So, if the cops are worried about that, I think, they'd probably be more worried about getting hit by friendly fire.
Yeah, if they have a concealed permit, I don't really see a problem with it. I mean, a gun's a gun, whether it looks like a gun or not look like a gun, so I don't really see any problem with this.
Yeah?
D.C. Cannabis held a pot smoke-in, where? Right in front of the White House. Only a couple of $25 fines. They didn't come after them draconianly. However, what they were trying to do was pressure the White House pressure Obama into doing what he's got a lot of practice in, which is doing executive actions without the consent of Congress. But this is one executive action he has said, well, no, I can't do that. And I'm talking about rescheduling marijuana as something other than a Class 1, I think it is, a drug, the highest, most restrictive drug classification, up there with heroin and other
Ecstasy,
opiates.
PCP, amphetamines.
LSD.
Yeah.
The definition is drugs with no established medical purpose.
And marijuana has so many established medical benefits.
Even recognized
now.
by the FDA in the form
Yes.
of Marinol.
Yes.
For the last, 20-some years.
Yeah.
So Obama saying, I can't do that because it's Congress prerogative is just so much balderdash.
Well,
as a matter of fact, the what do you call it? The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, is actually holding, announced here just a couple of days ago that within 6 months they're going to make an announcement as to what their latest decision is on whether or not to remove the Class 1 classification for marijuana. So they're considering it even as we speak. They're ignoring the fact that Obama says it has to be done by Congress.
Well,
more than likely they won't make a change, but
he's sort of right. He could make an executive decision on this, but it wouldn't stick. Some circuit court judge somewhere would say no, and they'd go back to. He can't change that ruling on his own. Congress could change it simply by changing a law. They could just pass a law, but he can't as an executive action.
He could.
Well, he could make he could take the action, but it would be instantaneously thrown out by
I don't think
court.
so. I don't necessarily think so.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about the D.C. Circuit. I can't see the D.C. Circuit.
Well, it doesn't take any circuit court could have.
No, it'd have to be D.C. Circuit, because
Does
that's
it?
where it is. It would have to start out in district court in D.C. and go to the D.C. District Court of Appeal. I don't see the D.C. District Court ruling the
Now,
way that you're suggesting.
it would be much easier, actually. I mean, it couldn't be overturned if Congress just passed a law and said, yeah. But the thing about the marijuana, actually, now, it's held to a higher standard from a medical research perspective than all of the other drugs that you just mentioned. There's only one place that, if you do get a permit to do medical research on marijuana, you get it from the one federal farm in Mississippi that can supply it.
Which I
Whereas-
understand does not grow the high-grade stuff anyway.
No, and all these other drugs, there are many sources of opiates and all the rest of that stuff. But you can only get your pot to test if you get approval by the government, and they very seldom hand that out. And the other thing is that actually HHS, Human Services, and FDA have more say. DEA is really just kind of the enforcement arm of it. They take their lead from the health folks, saying whether or not
the DEA's excuse over in not rescheduling marijuana has always been, well, the FDA has not done the expensive, time-consuming, ridiculous studies that they need to do in order to prove it's safe and effective. It's the same.
The safe and effective drugs that all these mass shooters that get all the publicity about have gone through that dunning process, and people still mix and match their scripts and go get a gun and shoot people. I don't think there's been any, mass murder other than these so-called terrorists who haven't been on some kind of prescription antidepressant or antipsychotic or something, and those drugs have all passed the scrutiny of the FDA.
Well, which just simply shows how flawed the FDA's methodology is.
You betcha.
And no question about that.
Well, and we're talking about the medical benefits. It's an anti-seizure drug. It helps asthmatics, people who are on, and these are proven. These are proven through field observation and experimentation, which is the best kind of research to do, not clinical lab tests on rats and monkeys. There are people who are on chemotherapy who can't eat, are too nauseous to eat and sustain their life. They have to go in IV treatment, and their veins are collapsing anyway from the chemo, and then they get pot, and their appetite returns, and they keep food down. And there's enough evidence there to show that marijuana has benefit.
The medical establishment, the medical bureaucracy would call that anecdotal evidence.
Well, if you have enough people in an experiment and you run the numbers and you show causation, I don't think you could call it anecdotal. But we could go round and round.
Only if you run a controlled, A/B test.
Yeah.
Well, that's the positive of actually living in California, is that you're really not going to go to jail for a bag of weed if you get pulled over by a cop. So, states' rights.
They'll just take your car and your money and everything else, asset forfeiture, right?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
how often does it happen for a bag of pot anymore?
What?
I mean, for a
Asset
couple of
forfeiture?
joints.
Civil asset forfeiture?
No, I mean just for a couple of joints.
Oh, I think it's whenever the sheriff feels like he needs a new car or a little bit of extra for the police benevolent
if he likes
fund.
your ski boat and his ski boat's kind of old.
Yeah, I think that's.
Or if the DA needs to pad their stats, they'll go after some pot grower, but it's rare. I mean, so straight rights finally won one on this one.
Well, we all know that the reason for drugs being illegal is that you should call it, instead of drug laws, they should call them employment laws. Because they're employment laws. They're full employment for cops, corrections officers, drug cartels, thugs, people who work in law in the courts. And without keeping these drugs illegal, those people would be unemployed. And if you ask a police chief or a police commissioner after they've had a couple too many to be over the legal limit when they drive, imagine they don't get many tickets though. I don't know why. They will tell you.
Professional courtesy.
They will tell you that flat out, the reason they don't support the legalization of these drugs, which are people are going to use anyway, and they're going to enrich thugs and drug cartels, is that it's a budget issue. They don't need half of their staff after that.
I'm reminded of the bust of a marijuana dispensary in Santa Ana, where the cops came in. They destroyed all of the cameras that they could see. Unfortunately, they did not realize that there was a hidden camera system, which continued to film as they started to eat the edibles within the marijuana dispensary.
Did they really?
They did, yes.
Where can I find that footage? I want to see that.
It's all over the YouTube.
So you know what the problem is they mistook them for a jelly donut.
And and that's exactly what I think it was a grand jury or somebody said. They thought, well, they thought it was just snacks for the staff. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on.
Why do we have such messed up adults? Probably because we're overprotective of children. Case in point, in Magnolia, Texas, at the Bear Branch Elementary School, the principal, a lady by the name of Holly Ray, has A, banned children from walking to school, B, banned children from being escorted to school on foot by their parents, C, banned kids from coming to school on bicycles, and in fact, she's destroyed removed the bicycle racks. The only way that you can come to or leave school is to get into a long automobile queue and be dropped off by your parents
Or
or
get
picked
on a
up.
bus.
Or get on a bus.
Or get on a school bus, yeah.
Thoughts?
So they have to wait in line for their parents to go and pick them up by car? Is that
Yes.
what
Yes.
Well, yeah, this is a complete disaster, but this is definitely a local issue, and I'm sure they will. Someone's going to the people the citizens of that city will hopefully elect a new superintendent in November, and they can hopefully fire this principal if there's no tenure issues, and hopefully they can change this. But it's definitely up to them, and this is a good time for people to stand up for their liberty.
The thing about it, though, is this is not an isolated instance. We've got places, we've got instances of all over the country of anecdotal stories of police arresting people for. There's a case recently. Cops arrested a 9-year-old for escorting his, I think it was 6-year-old cousin around the corner, a quarter mile away from his home to the McDonald's, and the 24-year-old mother has been arrested for child neglect. And presumably, she's facing child protective, CPS issues. I'm not sure.
So how far did they walk to school?
It's less
Those
than a
same
mile.
kids?
This is a different instance.
But what I'm saying is so they going to McDonald's is child endangerment, but going to school is.
Well, no, they're not being allowed to walk to school. That's the point.
Well, here they're not.
Yeah.
Here they're not. I just wonder.
Yeah.
I
Elsewhere?
wonder
I don't
about
know.
that McDonald's
I don't know.
incident.
But we've got an overprotective society in which Child Protective Services and local law enforcement, in many cases, are saying it is extremely dangerous out there. Your children can't free-range roam. Your children have to be under the watchful eye of a parent or guardian or some sort of an adult at all times if they're anywhere out in the public on the public square. I find that disturbing. If that would have been me growing up, I would have felt like I am in prison 100% of the time rather than just when I'm in school.
So
Yeah, it's sad because it seems like times were more dangerous 20 years ago, and yet we were more free as children to roam around, and things weren't so bad. And now things are, you could argue less dangerous, and yet now we're more restricted, whether we can go out and play or not, or go to school. It doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, what you're saying is statistically correct. Crime rates, violent crime
especially
rates.
violent crime.
Violent crime and theft,
I think this thing has a lot to
property
do with
crime.
it, right here.
Could be.
And now kids.
Well, that and more guns.
Yeah. Well, and kids can have one of these. Before, Richard and I are of an age. He's obviously, if you look, way older than I am, but we're in the general age range. And I remember.
I'm going to let you get by with that
Yeah.
just because you're bolder than I am.
That's true. Some people need hair. Yeah. I remember at age 10, Well, certainly at age 11, getting up in the morning and packing a lunch and getting on my bike with a bunch of other 11-year-old boys and riding our bikes 30, 40 miles with our fishing poles, going fishing. Nobody thought anything of it. We'd come home, we'd leave at dawn, we'd come home at dark, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And
Anecdotally, I mean, I grew up in rural Minnesota, and I walked 2 miles to school starting in first grade, uphill both ways in the snow.
Yeah.
And walked or rode a horse or rode my bike. Either one, depended on the weather, whether it was
Got on a
snowing or
buggy
not.
and-
Yeah. No horse and buggy, though. No, I mean, and my parents thought nothing of it, and neither did anybody else. I mean, everybody walked to school.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I used to roam the streets at Midtown back when Midtown wasn't so trendy as it is now. And 10 years old, no big deal. Walked to school, came home, and
And we all survived, and the crime was higher then than it is now.
It was.
I'm
And
mystified. I'm
kids
mystified
are-
by this whole attitude.
what I'm mystified by is that kids are, this whole protective appearance things, kids are, well, that kind of dovetails into it. Kids are much more at risk from someone they know and know well than they are from a stranger. Statistically, it's about 100 to 1.
And I think
yeah.
that's probably always been the case.
Yeah, but the media, if it bleeds, it leads, have made people fearful, and so the idea that she's saying this is for safety purposes, so it's safer to have parents stressed out, late for school or work or whatever, queuing in line in their cars. I'm surprised there
Or
hasn't
racing
been
to get there before.
yeah,
before
racing
the
to get
line.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, before the line forms, and then they're there too early. They're probably turned away. It's insanity. I'd love to see somebody interview her and ask her to walk through her reasoning on this.
Good
I'd
luck
see
with
that.
that.
Yeah.
A Maryland court is the first in the nation to require a warrant. Imagine that, for using Stingray or other cell phone bucking technology. Shane?
well, this is a good thing. They could finally start prosecuting criminals because they actually have a warrant instead of throwing out the case when they have to realize or reveal that they use Stingray to actually make this case, which is happening all over the country because, well, obviously it's illegal. The government knows it's illegal, and they're taking and they're just running amok with this. And I'm actually glad that they are getting warrants, even though Stingray is a pretty insidious device. And if when they put it in helicopters, they can do entire miles areas of just sucking up telephone conversations. And
Explain what Stingray is, just so the uninitiated know.
well, as far as I know, it's just a device that can capture all your texts and your telephone communications and can store it and use it against you in the court of law.
Yeah, it's a decoy cell phone.
It
transmitter.
mimics a cell tower.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's supposedly the
yeah.
size of a suitcase. And supposedly the ACLU went after some government entity and finally got them to reveal that supposedly all Stingray could do was find somebody's location and track the numbers. But now they're
The megadata.
yeah, the metadata. But
yeah.
now ACLU forced some people to reveal that they can actually record the incoming, outgoing calls
And probably read the text and the email.
intercept the content of voice and text communications.
Yeah.
And the document also discussed the possibility of flashing a phone's firmware. In other words, so you can intercept conversations using suspect cell phone as a bug. So,
Also, in
Shane,
other words, you don't even have to be using your phone in order for it to be used as a bug.
and Shane brought up a very good point, because the law requires these cops to get a warrant. They can subpoena historical data, and they can actually they can do that with just a subpoena, but they need a warrant to
For live. Yeah.
And so what they've been doing, as Shane quite rightfully said, is they've been ignoring that, and they've been intercepting this information and then using it, and things have been going out of court. But I want to talk about that next one real quick before we
Okay,
get
Max Planck Institute of Meteorology in Germany says,
that aerosol radiative forcing is less negative and more certain than is commonly believed. So on the surface of it, what it means is, in the past they thought that aerosols, which are particulate matter, a byproduct of a lot of things, and then there are some aerosol sprays that are aerosols on their own, actually reflected a tremendous amount of the sun's radiation. So now what they're saying is that aerosols are offsetting less global warming than was previously thought. Now this is, when you think about it, you think that, oh, that supports global warming, raving lunacy theorists. But what it says is that since temperatures aren't rising as radically as they said, then the opposite side of that, which is the CO2 part of the equation, is less powerful. If the aerosols aren't reflecting this energy, then the CO2 is not absorbing as much energy as they thought it did. Therefore, they're having to rewrite all these models for lower predictions of global warming.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
The science
These
finally
models.
catching up.
You know, I wrote a model that two of the most popular actresses in Hollywood should come knocking on my door when my wife's out of town, and that hasn't happened. So remember, it's a model, folks. It's not observed behavior.
I know you want to talk about the last topic here. We have 2 minutes. Japan has started with zero interest rates, and as a result,
Complete disaster. I mean, Europe's already ahead of the game on this, and they show that it's not working, and it's going to lead to malinvestment. It'll chase money towards other risky investments, which again will lead to more disasters, probably more bailouts, depending on who's elected, and
it robs savers of their income late in life. And in Japan, those savers are turning to what instead?
I guess shoplifting apparently. But not only that, not only just robs savers, but it robs
Shoplifting so they can go to jail for free room and board.
Right.
As a last resort.
But it also robs company of capital, and you can't actually expand a country without capital. So it's really all bad. It'll end into a bond disaster.
Are you listening, Janet Yellen? Thank you very much for being part of the show. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place, on the Libertarian Counterpoint, on accesssacramento.org, on YouTube, and on cable channels all over the place. Thank you very much. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Richard. Enjoyed the show.